My name is Runo, and this is 5 True Bigfoot Stories. Something creepy happened to me and my boyfriend a few days ago, and we've been wondering how to explain it. Also, sorry, English is not my first language. A few days ago, we were road tripping through Tuscany, Italy. One night when we decided to sleep in our car in order to catch the first ferry in the morning for an island, we rode through a side road leading into the wheat fields and decided to park our car in a corner. There was no one and nothing around. Only some very distant houses. Also, the moon was almost non-existent, so everything was quite dark. Since we were not yet ready to sleep, we spent some time inside the car, recording some nature sounds and hoping to see one of the many wild hogs in the region. I even left a piece of bread next to the car, hoping to attract one of them. After a while, amid the sound of crickets, we started hearing something large approaching us, coming from the field right on our left. It really sounded like a wild hog coming closer and closer, so we sat in silence and observed the field quietly, looking for anything moving in the dark. We were looking intensively at the field, only hearing the hog getting closer and closer, when suddenly we noticed two dark, tall, human-like figures coming down the road towards us, quietly and in complete darkness. I immediately found this strange, since 1, they were walking without light in the middle of an almost moonless night, on a road leading basically to nowhere. 2, they were approaching us in complete silence, without saying a word to each other. Of course, I thought maybe I was just being a bit paranoid. Maybe they were the owners of the field coming towards us to ask us who we were or to park elsewhere. But then why without light? Why were they not speaking? My boyfriend suggested maybe they were simply two guys going for a night walk, so we should just chill and let them pass. But the two figures kept on approaching. Suddenly it was clear they were coming to our car. Not simply walking down the road, and still without light and without saying anything. I kept my eyes on them, expecting them to at least say something or engage conversation with us, but they didn't. Instead, they were more or less 6 to 7 meters from us. They stopped facing us. I was already super scared by the whole situation, but it got stranger. At that point, a small red light appeared at more or less head height of one of the two figures, something like a red dot. Instinctively, I felt in danger. Thought something that they were maybe pointing a gun at us. I know that sounds stupid, but it was my first thought. My also not so rational thought was to shout at them aggressively, something like, "Hey you," in Italian of course. The red light then disappeared, but still, they didn't say a word, not even to each other. Instead, they walked back for a bit. Then again, at more than 20 meters from us, they stopped, turned again towards us, and again we saw the red dot appearing. This time I didn't think twice, turned the car on, and left hastily. A week passed and we were still thinking about what happened. What was that red dot? Was it some kind of night goggles thing? What were those two men doing there? Why did they approach us? Were we in danger or simply scared of something trivial? Were they hoping to catch us in our sleep? Were they simply illegal wild hog hunters? But if so, why didn't they speak at all? Not even after I shouted at them. We know nothing of guns, night vision goggles, or hunting, so we thought maybe some of you could help us explain this creepy happening. Thanks in advance. My girlfriend and I were driving to Arizona. We got out of Albuquerque heading down Route 60, and I believe, I'm not 100% sure, it was some time ago, but it was some one-lane stretch of whatever highway we got onto to Prescott, Arizona, when we saw it. It was right before dusk, and we were in the middle of nowhere. While driving, we see a human-like figure, but super tall and massive on the side of the highway, just standing there. It was probably a little over 100 feet ahead. My girlfriend stops the car. She thinks it could be a person who needed help, but once we stopped the car, she realized, like I did, that was not a person. We were terrified. I never believed in Bigfoot. I thought the idea was cute, but never really thought it was legit until this day. We were both panic-stricken. We locked the car doors. I told her to drive. Go now. She was paralyzed by fear. We watched as this thing cleared the highway in 4 or 5 steps. A human would have at least taken 15. Not this thing. It was massive. His big arm swaying as it walked, went across the road. There was a ravine and we couldn't see where it went, so again I told her to drive. We didn't have eyes on it after it crossed the highways. After watching that, it could have come up on us super quick. We bolted as fast as her little Honda could go. We passed the part where he had crossed. He was nowhere to be found. We both just shook our head in belief and almost simultaneously said Bigfoot. I have no doubts in my mind that it was in fact Bigfoot. I decided to share an encounter my father had while staying at my grandmother's trailer in a nearby county here in northeast Kentucky. For the sake of the story, I'll call the county Webb, Kentucky, and it consisted of not a town but instead a series of deep wooded hollers and winding roads up the Appalachian Mountains, which runs through my area. At the time, I was about 9 or 10 years old, and my father at the time would spend nights staying at my grandmother's trailer in a holler that had a old blacktop road that went past her place and went off in front of her trailer connecting to another holler. She had a neighbor who lived approximately 100 or so yards away, also in a trailer. Her trailer was purchased by my grandfather when my father was a kid, sometime in the late 60s or 70s. My grandfather, after getting the trailer, also planted 2 peach trees on the left side of the trailer in the yard. After my grandfather had passed away in 2007 at the age of 80, my grandmother afterwards lived there by herself, and starting around 2010 would complain of someone banging or knocking on the trailer walls at night. This would persist for nights on end, until finally they quit for a time and then returned. This got so bad to the point that my father had to stay with her at night because she was so terrified by what was happening. The knocking would even start when he was there as well, and my father would go grab my grandfather's shotgun and open the front door to find nothing there. One night when my grandma's only living sister was staying with her and my father at the trailer that night, my dad heard a commotion at the back door. My father grabbed a light and went out back. The following is what he described seeing. Walking away from the back door is, as my father called, ginormously gigantic. All black creature walking down the slope leading to the road beside the house. He followed it all the way to the road and says that it looked back at him twice while walking. He said the eyes glowed red and it walked into the woods by the road. My father went back into the trailer and his face was as white as a ghost, as if seeing something beyond the realm of science fiction. He'd seen something real. My father would call a few minutes later to relay the incident to my mom before I went to bed that night. A couple of years ago, I was on a week-long backpacking trip in the high Uintas in Utah during late August. I spent my last 2 nights near Granddaddy Lake. Before I entered the basin, I encountered 2 guides going the opposite direction. They informed me that they had been there for 4 days and hadn't seen another person. During that, it was very quiet there. When I arrived in the basin, I noticed that it was very quiet, not much wildlife to be heard or seen, including birds. Anyhow, the first night and the next day were uneventful, and I hiked the perimeter of the lake, never encountering anyone else. The next day, a storm passed through the area, driving the temperature enough that it actually snowed and stuck to the ground. I was at around 10,000 feet, 3,000 meter elevation, so I hunkered down for the night in my tent as soon as the sun dipped behind the peaks. At about 2:30 a.m., I was awakened by a loud knocking sound to what seemed to be north of my camp. It took me a second to focus my attention, then I heard what was an unmistakable whoop coming from the same direction. I laid in my sack quietly. Then again I heard another whoop that seemed to be coming from further to the north. This was followed by a reply from what I'm guessing was the original individual. This went on for about 15 minutes, each time the sound drifting further to the north. Eventually it went quiet again. Needless to say, I didn't sleep well the rest of the night. I had to be on the trail early the next morning to get back to my car, so I didn't have a chance to go look around for any physical evidence. I'm not saying it was a Sasquatch, but I've never heard anything like it, and I've spent most of my life hiking, hunting, and backpacking. I did some research on BFRO, and there have been a few reports in that area. Anyhow, that's my possible encounter. I was a young Coast Guardsman, about 21 years old back in 1981. Our boat was the Coast Guard cutter Sumac stationed at St. Louis, Missouri, foot of Iron Street. It wasn't a cutter, it was a river-going tugboat with a buoy tender barge on the front of the buoy operations, red nuns and black cans. At the time of the incident, we were heading back upriver to St. Louis for a week of setting buoys starting at the Ohio River. What a fun job that was. Backbreaking, but a good workout for a young man like myself. When we finished our daily ATON, aids and navigation ops for the day, we simply pushed the barge onto a bank and tie off to a big tree for overnight makeshift mooring. A group of us would always leave the boat for a couple hours and explore the area of anything unusual or more often lonely women looking for a fling with a coastie. The place where we had moored was next to the railroad track leading to and from St. Louis on the Missouri side, probably 20 to 30 miles south of St. Louis. We put down the gangway and strode onto the woodsy land, about 4 of us. There were river bluffs beyond the railroad tracks and what looked like a few caves for us to explore. It was otherwise inaccessible from anywhere but the railroad tracks and the river. We walked about 200 feet into the meadow/hollow that abutted a cave when we heard an ear-piercing scream from our left. It was so loud we just froze in place. It was directed at us. One of my shipmates said it must have been a screech owl, but I've listened to recordings of screech owls since then, and that scream was no screech owl. It was a guttural and booming, bone-chilling loud, so much that we could feel it inside our bones. We turned around and went back to the boat. That scream unnerved us. I didn't know anything about Bigfoot back then. I believe now that I've heard other Bigfoot encounter vocalizations, that we happened onto a Bigfoot lair in that cave system just south of St. Louis, Missouri. I bet they still use that cave to this day, and and provides a great hideout for them and has completely cut off from any human trespassing.